How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to be working on making some Dash 6 fuel lines. So when we threw the cage in, we had to cut out the stock fuel lines. They had hard lines running all the way from the fuel pump and where it actually feeds into the fuel rails, going all the way through the cabin to the fuel tank. So those didn't work really at all with the cage, so had to cut those out, and now we actually have to run some new ones. So like I said, we're going to be running some AN flexible stainless steel lines all the way from the fuel tank up to the fuel filters where they'll pick up, and it'll be rubber. So if you haven't seen any of my videos in the past, currently what I'm doing is I'm building my Subaru right here into a stage rally car. So that's why it's got this roll cage, the interior's white, everything's stripped out. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you should subscribe. I try to post content pretty regularly. All right, I haven't fully looked at what I even have. So I have to check and see if I have all the stuff. I ordered a whole bunch of fittings and whatnot. Enough for 3 lines, but I don't have to run 3 lines. The third line that actually runs through the cabin is the evap for like the purge system that goes up to the intake manifold and then back to the charcoal canister. I already deleted the charcoal canister a long time ago because the hoses were ripped and it actually like came down and fell off the car during a rally cross event, not an actual stage rally. So it ended up getting torn off at that event. So I don't need that third line. So I ordered too much stuff, but I should have plenty of excess of material to actually get all these done and not run into any issues with that. So I'm gonna tear into this box some and see exactly what I've got. So I went with Vibrant Performance lines for everything and their fittings because they have pretty good reviews. They're decently priced for AN fittings. And I kind of went with Overkill lines just in case I ever want to run E85 on this, because that is a pretty viable option with the car, which is bigger injectors and get quite a bit more power out of it and have a little bit more safety for like increasing the knock and whatnot. Now this isn't going to be a crazy engine build or anything like that, so E85 would be far off in the future if I ever decide to like turbo swap the car again, or if I want to actually build a crazy NA engine. But that's, like I said, far off in the future, so we'll get into this. Now the only rules that there actually are when you remake your fuel lines are if they go through the cabin, they have to be of a metal shell. Now if the outer material isn't actually steel, or if you can't tell that it's steel just by looking at it on the outside, you have to cut a little piece of it of the same material and bring it with you to rallies and actually show the scrutineer and the tech inspector that's actually going to check off your car, so that way you can show that it is actually rated for what they require. So it has to be stainless steel rated up to 1000 psi for bursting pressure. So somewhat heavy stuff. You can't just run rubber fuel line all the way through your cabin because that's kind of unsafe in case you ever get like rocks or something in there, get caught on your foot or something and you tear a hole in it or whatever. So it's just a lot safer to run the heavily protected stainless steel lines all the way through the car. And they look pretty cool. So like I said, I bought enough to do 3 lines because I didn't think about it before I ordered it, but I only need 2. So these are 10-foot sections, which should be more than enough. I'll have to trim a little bit to run from the fuel tank all the way forward. And I'm just gonna follow along the driver's side to keep the routing as simple and easy as possible. Now before I actually get started on making these fuel lines and sizing everything up, I do want to open up my garage door, push the car outside because it is a mess in here. I need to clean it up just a little bit before I get started. We finally have a nice day, so I don't have to worry about pushing the car out, and the paint is plenty cured enough since it's been sitting for about 3 or 4 days and we've had decently warm days. So I don't have to worry about that. Plus, like I said, it's really nice outside. It's 60 degrees and sunny, which is quite a rare occasion this time of year over here. But yeah, gonna push it out real quick and then we'll get to work. All right, car's back in here. Everything's kind of clean. It's still a huge mess in here and I really need to clean it. So that's the plan for this weekend, to do that off camera, just clean the crap out of this thing, try to organize some of the stuff over there, some of the parts of the car, maybe start putting the parts back on the car so I don't have to find a place for them because they can go back to their home. Anyway, time to get started on this. So it should be fairly easy. Like I said, we're only making 2 fuel lines. The trickiest part that I'm actually going to be doing is making gaskets for the firewall and the back. So I'm kind of trying a creative way that I kind of thought of. I don't know if it'll work. It involves like thick rubber that I've got, not really thick enough. I figured that it would be like harder to move, more like gasket material, but it's really pliable. So I'm not sure how well it's gonna work, but we'll give that a shot later on. Obviously, if it doesn't work, then I'm gonna have to wait on actually putting the tips on these things on the firewall side. But we can at least get started on the back and cut them all the length and whatnot, and connect them completely to the back as well. So this is generally going to be the routing that I'm actually going to follow. So it comes down through this hole. I got to make a gasket for right here too. And then it's going to just follow kind of all the way along this tube. So I can actually zip tie it to the tube, and then I can follow up this tube as well. So clearly I have plenty of leftover material on the firewall side, as you can see. So we're just going to start by putting the fittings on the fuel tank side, and then once we do that, hook it all up and whatnot, do it with both lines, run them exactly how they're going to go, connect them and whatnot, and then I'll leave a little bit extra length because I'm not sure exactly where they're going to need to go, and I can always like pull a little bit on the inside and change the how much is actually sticking out of the firewall a little bit later on, but I definitely don't want to take away too much, and then I end up with having to run more rubber hose than I actually want to. Now, like I said, I'm just going to thread one side and then we can cut it to length once we actually get it all exactly in place. So if you've never done AN fittings, they're super easy to do, but they can kind of seem like they're kind of tricky to do at first, like if you've never done them. I know initially before I'd ever done them, I was kind of standoffish towards them, like I thought it was harder than it was. Then I did them and I realized it's super easy. So a nice clean cut using like a cutoff wheel or something like that and taping it up before you do it is definitely going to help. That way when you get the actual frayed ends and whatnot, the tape's holding it together and you get a nice clean cut. So if you use like something that's going to like squeeze it, that's really not going to work. Same with, you can use like a fine tooth hacksaw, but that would be kind of annoying to do. So using a cutoff wheel is definitely the easiest way that I've found to do it. But yeah, I'm going to pull off their tape that they've got here and then just start threading this on. So this is the piece that goes on the hose first, and it's going to slide on with this end, the end without the threads on it. It's just going to go onto the hose and you're going to bottom it out in there. Next, the male end is actually going to go in and thread into that piece that you just put on the hose. It kind of helps if you put a little bit of oil on there so it can actually go into the hose a little bit better, and it won't bind as much, and you just tighten it. And it helps if you mark exactly where on the AN fitting this piece ends up. So like if it ends up here, you want to make sure and put like a little line or something like that, just in case as you're tightening it's just pulling this piece off and it's not actually making a good seal, because you don't want to fully assemble your hoses or something like that and you realize that you've got a leak once you actually get like fuel pressure going through this or something. So definitely make sure that it doesn't move once you're tightening it, and it'll make more sense once I actually start assembling it. Now I'm going to use my vise to hold this piece just to make it a little bit easier, but you definitely don't need a vise to do this. You can just use a wrench to hold back and get creative with it. You really don't need much more than, you can probably do it with just an adjustable wrench, honestly, to do the whole thing. But it's easier if you have a vise. You want to be careful with it though and not mess up your really nice, pretty looking fittings that you just spent a lot of money on, because AN fittings are freaking expensive if you've never actually bought them. So now, like I said, this piece is going into this fitting, and then I'm going to mark exactly where it goes. While you're doing this, you want to try to put as many of the burrs in as possible, so you want to get all of them in, because if you just try to like shove it in, it's definitely not going to go in there perfectly, and you're going to get some frayed ends. So as you kind of rotate it and push it in, you're going to have some issues with the actual braided portion like coming undone and popping out, and it's going to look bad and it's going to have a bad seal. So you definitely don't want to do that. So just go in at an angle almost, and then just kind of help it along with a screwdriver until you get it in there. Now once you get it all the way in, you want to put a little mark at the edge of your fitting, like I was saying earlier, just in case when you install the actual nail end of the fitting to make the seal, in case it pushes it out and you end up with a bad seal. You definitely don't want that. So make a line, simple check, and you'll have good fittings every time as long as it doesn't move. And I'm still going to use the vise to hold the nail end now, just to kind of make it easier, and one less thing that you actually have to try to hold on to. But like I said, it's definitely possible without it, and it's really easy without it too. This is where a little bit of oil kind of comes into play, but that's not necessary either. Just to add it to it, to help get it into the actual hole of the hose, and that way you don't have any issues with it binding. Alright, first fitting is done. Didn't move based on the mark, so that's good. Now we can start on the next line, and then we can mount them into the back, route them, trim them, make that gasket, and call it a night.
2, 3, jump!
So this is the material, and I definitely don't think that this is going to be thick enough to do this, and it's definitely, like, as you can tell, super flimsy. It's not like really good gasket material. It might get a little bit harder once I actually apply the cement for the rubber that I got. So the plan is, we got these 3 pieces. This will leave quite a bit of a gap on the outside for it to seal. This can go in the center, and this goes on the other side, and just kind of finagle those through. So we're gonna give it a shot. Might as well, since I have it. This stuff, I think it dries really fast. 5 minutes, yeah, it's pretty quick. So we'll give it a shot. Why not? Well, this didn't work at all. I'm going to try some different material. This stuff's just way too thin and doesn't react well with that contact cement. So I'm probably gonna go grab like a mud flap or something from a local hardware store or auto parts store. And that should be a little bit better because it's a lot thicker rubber and it'll seal a lot nicer, and for like heavier duty than this crap that's super flexible and would suck as a gasket anyway. You can just like push it right through. So I'm done for the night. I got so much other stuff unrelated to cars that I gotta take care of, so I gotta take a break, so I'll just pick this up in the morning. Went and bought this overpriced floor mat. It's for a Ford, and it's like the only thick piece of, it's like, I think it's rubber, it might be vinyl, I'm not sure. It might work, it's still pretty pliable as you can see. It should work, I don't know. I'm gonna give it a shot, cut it up. I'm not gonna use that contact cement because that stuff sucks, but I've got some 3M adhesive that should work. It's made for like waterproof or like underwater type application, so it should really work well, since it's supposed to be able to seal everything completely waterproof. So I'm gonna grab that, open it up and whatnot, and cut out my pieces that I actually need, if I can find these, so I can just trim it along the same lines as I did on these. And then once I do that, glue it all together, and it should work, hopefully, because I'd rather not have to order like a big block of rubber and then actually do that. But that would work too. That's kind of what I should have done in the beginning, because that definitely would have worked. Well, I would clean all this up and paint it and whatnot, but I really just don't care. So the booster is going to get deleted anyway pretty soon because I want to go to manual brakes because it's kind of overrated to run a booster with rally, because most of the time, not necessarily in a naturally aspirated car, but you don't really build any sort of vacuum if you run a turbocharger. So most of the time in rally, you'll have anti-lag system on your car to where you really never see vacuum, even on decel, even slight braking and stuff like that. So you kind of just delete it and go to manual brakes. I prefer the feel anyway, because if you kind of get a really inconsistent feel with left foot braking when you have a booster and you actually run out of vacuum. Like if you're using it quite regularly to try to tighten up your turn and stuff, but you're staying on the throttle so you're not really seeing any vacuum. You run out of vacuum very quickly in this reservoir, and then you end up with somewhat manual brakes, and it's really inconsistent. So sometimes you'll be pushing the brake and you'll have plenty of vacuum assist, and if you're not used to it, or if you're expecting the other way, you're gonna like push the pedal too hard, or vice versa. If you actually are expecting to have some vacuum in here, you don't. You go to push the pedal and you have to actually use a lot more force to actually activate the brakes. So when you race, at least in rally, because there's so much left foot braking, depending on your driving style, obviously, because some people don't use left foot braking. I do it pretty prominently because I just kind of enjoy the kind of control that it gives me of the car. So eventually this will go away. I just don't feel like doing it now because it's just gonna overcomplicate things, and I don't want to run manual brakes with stock size master cylinder, because if you watched my last video where I made the hydro, kind of talked a little bit about it, but an improperly sized master cylinder and manual brakes, or like a hydro or something like that, it's really going to increase the pedal effort and you're not going to get a very good feel. So I'm definitely not planning on doing that, but eventually I will, and I'll go to the properly sized master. But that's all in the future. I'll probably even do like a dual master cylinder setup. So you have one master cylinder just for the rear brakes and then one for the fronts. And that way you can actually dial in the bias between the two, and you don't have to just rely on one master cylinder providing fluid for all of them. So that way you can kind of size it a little bit more to where it's easier for you to push as well, because you can go with the smaller diameter master cylinder because you're only providing fluid to 2 brakes at a time and not all 4. And that was a lot of rambling, so hopefully you got something out of it if you're actually trying to learn something, and if I explained it well. So I'm going to continue to throw stuff in here, get this in there, bolt it all up, grab the master cylinder, throw that in, and then the same thing with the clutch master as well. Wow. Lines are all ran, and I think it looks a lot better than stock, that's for sure, because the hard lines were really annoying to deal with anyway, and they pretty much ran the same way, kind of on the sill of the car, but at least this way, like I was saying in the beginning, you don't have to worry about the lines actually getting crushed between the chassis and the actual roll cage now that it's actually running on the sill bar. So if anything pushes it in, it'll just bend with the tube, and I don't have to worry about it getting sandwiched between it all and then getting cut off. So the only thing that I actually need to complete the fuel lines are the barb fittings to actually meet up with the rubber hose that I've got. And in the engine bay, it's going to be going to the fuel filter right here, which I have to make a mount for because I think I broke the mount when I took it off. So I'm not gonna be able to use the stock mount. Either that or I can go to the junkyard and probably pull it off, because I need to go to a junkyard pretty soon anyway, because they just got a Subaru in, like a 98 Impreza. So I'm planning on pulling the back glass out of that. That way I don't have to make some plexiglass rear windows or anything like that. It would have been a productive day if I'd gotten all this done last night, but I definitely didn't. So I'm just gonna end this video now before I get started on other stuff, but not too bad. Got the brake booster, master cylinder, pedal assembly back in there, accelerator cable, and like the clutch master in there, so that's good. Slowly adding stuff back to it. Fuel lines are done-ish. So I'm going to start on brake lines after this, but I'll just put that in another video so this one's not super long. So yeah, I'll see you guys when I start adding more stuff to the car and doing brake lines.